Bueno, entonces vamos a ir empezando. Bienvenidos, bienvenidas todos ustedes a este quinto y último encuentro del ciclo Cristianos, judíos y gentiles, Historia y literatura en la Antigüedad Tardía. Como siempre, queremos empezar agradeciendo a Sofía Quiñones, a Violeta Muñoz, Ignacio Rosner y a Uriel Fernández, que nos dan una mano clave con toda la parte técnica. Obviamente también al Instituto de Historia Antigua y Medieval de la Facultad de Filosofía y Letras de la UBA, y al IMHICIHU, del CONICET, que son las instituciones que nos están avalando. En esta ocasión contamos con la sorprendente para nosotros realmente presencia del profesor Anders Christian Jacobsen, al cual ahora va a presentar formalmente Rodrigo Laham Cohen, pero queríamos obviamente agradecer su presencia. Professor Jacobsen, we would really like to thank you for your participation today. Y ahora sí, Rodrigo, si querés hacer la presentación formal y comenzamos.
Vale. Bueno, yo voy a hacer la presentación en inglés porque, claro, nuestro invitado es la lengua que entiende, además del danés y otras, pero no el español. Bien. We are pleased to welcome Dr. Anders Christian Jacobsen, a very special guest from Denmark. Dr. Jacobsen is professor of theology in the School of Culture and Society that belongs to the Department of Theology of the Aarhus University. Dr. Jacobsen's specialty is Christology, and in the last years, he had been researching on origins Christology. Since 2014, he's professor in systematic theology in the Aarhus University. He was visiting researchers in the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, in Halle-Wittenberg, in Bologna, Pisa, and Marburg. In relation to our country, to Argentina, in 2017, he became honorary professor at the Universidad Católica de Cuyo, and in 2019, advisor for the PhD program in theology at the Universidad Católica de Cuyo. Between 2016 and 2019, he was the leader of the European Union-funded Marie Curie ITN network, The History of Human Freedom and Dignity in Western Civilization. This is only one of his projects, but it is also the most important project of his last years. And today, Dr. Jacobsen will be talking about Augustine's attitudes towards Jews. So, Anders, thank you again for accepting our invitation, and you can start whenever you want.
Thank you very much for the welcome and for the invitation to give this presentation here at your seminar. I'm very impressed to see so many people attending. I have had quite long now relationship to Rodrigo since you were in Aarhus. I don't even know exactly which year it was now, but
in 2014.
2014 it was, yes, and for some months, and I have also had the pleasure to visit Argentina in Buenos Aires and also in the West in San Juan, which was an amazing experience for a person coming from the far north. So I have a very good memories and impressions of Argentina, and also the scholarship in the places I have been in touch with. So I'm happy to be invited, and I hope I can say something which you do not know already. But I'm a theologian, as I was introduced, and work more with ideas than with sociology. So that will also be clear from what I will say. But and then I hope we can have a discussion about the things which I present to you. Unfortunately, I do not speak or understand Spanish, which I would have loved to, because so many people speak this language. But I hope you can understand my English, which is, of course, also foreign to me and not very fluent. And then we can take the discussion in English, because I think we are all able to speak as non-English mother tongue speakers. We probably can make each other understandable, and then we'll find a way through this. So thank you for inviting me, and I will share my screen now. I have some slides here which I follow in my presentation, and they are. Sorry. Okay. Can you see my?
No.
No. Now I made some mistakes. Just a minute.
Yeah.
Okay, let me see. Share, and he.
Oh.
That works?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I can see a few of you now.
If you can open the presentation in order to see the full screen, but we can read.
Yeah, I should. Okay, yeah, that was what I tried to do, and okay, I have to.
No, but it's okay if you want. You can continue.
No, I would prefer, because I stopped sharing now, and then I just.
Open the presentation and then share again.
Yes. So, works.
Perfect.
Then I came to the end. So now I think it's working, and I have two screens, so I might look a little to the, not to the camera, just to see my own slides from time to time. But this is the title that I decided together with Rodrigo. So it's on Augustine's attitude toward the Jews. I have done a number of studies on Augustine, and also a bit on his relation to the Jews. So that's I will take some texts from Augustine to see what he says. So, but first, here you can see the content of my presentation. First, I will say a little bit about Rodrigo's studies on this, because it's a bit among you, there is a person who knows probably a lot more on about this than I do. So I will. This is a good way into the topic, and then I will try to specify something from my point of view. Then a little bit about this versus Judaism motive before Augustine, and then I will look at three texts of Augustine: versus Judaism, the sermon against the Jews, and Contra Faustum, and the City of God. These texts will be what I discuss, and then I will come to the question whether Augustine actually know any Jews at all, or are his Jews, which he speaks about in these texts, real or imagined Jews, would be a question. And then in the end, I will say something about different evaluations of Augustine's point of view. First, just I suppose you know now what I will say. Now I have a. Sorry, I changed my the slides. But first, I'll say a little bit about Rodrigo's. What you say, Rodrigo, in your book, The Jews in Late Antiquity. which was published in 2018, because there you have a paragraph also on Augustine, and there you basically say what I think there is to be said. It can be, of course, unfolded more. You say there first that the level of Augustine's aggressivity or negative view of the Jews are different in different texts, and I think that's a good point, and I think it depends on the accuracies of the audience of these different texts. I will come back to this with the three texts I'm presenting. And then you also raised the question whether he actually knew any Jews or not. And you point to, I think, maybe the only concrete example where in one of his letters, I think there is a reference to his, he acted in many cases as a judge about a lot of concrete things, and also about sharing of land and ownerships and so on. And there is a remark where he judged in a conflict of over some land, and he judged, one of the parties in this conflict is a Jew, and he judges in favor of this Jewish person. So there might, I don't know how much you can learn from that, but there is at least one concrete example of his dealing with a concrete Jew. Then you also point to these research positions on Augustine's attitude to the Jews. There is the traditional approach that Augustine is as hostile to Jews as all other early Christian theologians. So he is simply one of many in the first centuries. But there is also a more contemporary position, mainly represented by Paula Fredriksen, who says that Augustine was less hostile to Jews than most other Christian theologians in the first centuries. And her idea is that that this is because he is discussing with Jews, with other Christian theologians who are more hostile and negative towards the Jews than he himself is, and then he have to take a more positive position. But that's because of an internal discussion among Christians about the Jews, and mainly about Hebrew scripture. So this general adversus Judaeus motive, which you find in many early Christian authors, as early as at least in the 2nd century, probably also already in the 1st century, you have some at least some indications in the Christian New Testament part of the Christian Bible. But there the pictures are different, but because you also have more positive attitudes there. For example, in Paul, who on the one hand is negative, but also say that the Jews have a specific function in the process of salvation for Christians. So Paul, for example, is not totally negative, but he has also all the discussions about Jewish law and so on, where he's more negative. But then, at least from the 2nd century on, you have a more or less a common image among Christian authors. They present Jews as those who killed Christ. So that's the main crime of the Jews, that the Jewish people killed Christ. And that's, of course, a rebellion against the will of God, according to the Christians. And that was the reason why the temple was destructed by the Romans, and the Jewish people was spread all, driven out of Jerusalem and spread over all the Mediterranean world. And then now the question is Augustine simply one of many early Christians who have this very negative and hostile attitude towards Jews, or do we have at least a slightly different attitude in Augustine? That will be a main question in what I present in the following. So now I go to these three texts and pick out some sentences and ideas from these texts, and before I come to some more general conclusions. So the first text is this Versus Judaeus text, which is a sermon probably, and that means the audience of this was Christians. So we do not really have Augustine communicating with Jews. So Augustine's audience are always Christians of one or the other kind. In this case, the audience was his own congregation. So it was Christians in his own camp, so to say. In the next text, this is different. So in this text, he takes his point of departure by Paul in the Romans chapters 9 to 11, where Paul has this big discussion about the role of the Jews, where he claims that the Jews were cast out because of the Gentiles. The Gentiles should be allowed and access to God, and to help this, the Jews were cast out. So the Jews were cast out for the sake of the Gentiles. And there, Paul says this because of this, the Christians should not, as he says, boast against the Jews, because when the Jews are cast out, it's for the sake of the Christians. And then Paul says, when the Gentiles have become Christians, then the Jews will also be saved. So it's not a clearly positive statement concerning the Jews, of course, but it's also a warning to Christians that they should not be hostile towards the Jews, because the Christians are saved only because the Jews were cast out. But so this is his point of departure, but then he goes on to his main topic, I would say, which is can you hear me? Okay, because I
yes, it was there was an interruption, but now we are hearing you.
Okay, you are. So he is mainly discussing how to understand what Christians call the Old Testament, and what we could call with a more general term, the Hebrew Bible, just to be more neutral, how to understand these scriptures and who to understand them. And Augustine's claim is that the Jews do not understand the Hebrew Bible. And then he discusses obedience of the law, who is the law of the Torah or the Hebrew Bible, and he says that it's the Christians who are obey the laws in the right way of the Hebrew Bible, and not the Jews, because the Christians have the right understanding that it's not the ceremonial laws and so on which should be followed, but the spiritual content, so to say. Is it okay now with because I can see that I have some problems with the connection, but you can see and hear me?
Yeah, it's everything's okay.
Yeah, okay, fine. Let me know if it's not. And then the next question he discusses is to whom the promises of the old. Okay, there's a spelling mistake. The Old Testament is given, and he claims that it's actually to the Christians and not to the Jews. And then he comes with this classical accusation that the Jews killed the Christians. So there he have a very common idea, which you find in many texts. But then again, on the other hand, he says that Christians should also proclaim and talk about God's love towards the Jews. So even if he says that the Jews killed Christ, then he still claims that God loves the Jews, and he is there. He still have a positive plan with the Jews. And then I have a longer quote here from chapter 7 in this sermon, and I just quote now: "Do you not rather belong to his enemies, referred to in the Psalm 59:11? This becomes very central. This verse from the Psalms, and the Psalms say, "My God shall let me see over my enemies. Slay them not, lest any time they forget the law. Scatter them by the power." That is the reason why, not unmindful of the law of God, but bearing that same law about for a covenant to the Gentiles and a reproach to yourself, you unknowingly are ministering the law to a people that has been called from the rising of the setting. From the rising to the setting of the sun. So what Augustine says in this quote is, by help of this psalm, which he often uses when he speaks about the Jews, is that even if the Jews do not know it themselves, they are preaching the law and the gospel to the Gentiles, because when they killed Christ, God could have slain them, killed the Jews, but he didn't. Instead, he scattered them around the world, and in this way they carried the Torah, or what became for the Christians the Old Testament, around the whole world. And then in this way they, as he says, ministered to the law to a people that has been born from the rising to the setting of the sun. So actually the Jews, by spreading all over the world, carrying the Torah with them, became evangelists to the Gentiles. And that was part of God's plan. Therefore the Jews were not slain, but dispersed all over the world. And he returns to this motive several times. So what can we conclude, or how can we understand this text? First of all, Augustine is clearly preaching to Christians, not to Jews. So it is not a discussion with Jews or any way to try to convince the Jews about anything. His audience are Christians. And then also the case is that at Augustine's time, the Jewish Torah has for long been a established and fixed part of the Christian canon, called by the name of the Old Testament. So all these texts, including the prophets and the Psalms and so on, were for Christians considered as Christian text at the time of Augustine, and therefore he had to introduce and interpret these texts to his Christian communities and try to find out how to understand what Christians call the Old Testament. So that's mainly what he's doing in this sermon, trying to explain his congregation how to understand this part of the Christian canon of Holy Scriptures. But then you can speculate a little bit. Why was it so important for him to discuss who understood these texts correctly? If he's preaching to a Christian congregation, you should assume that he could easily say that, this is our text, we know how to interpret them. There's no need for arguing a lot about this. So you could think about whether there were what Paul, for example, would call Judaizing Christians in Augustine's communities. And we know that this was the case in other parts, at least further to the east. There were not a clear-cut border between Jews and Christians in these first centuries. And for example, Chrysostom often had Christians who also had many Jewish rituals and so on, and went to the synagogue on the and so on. And he had to, in his case, it was very important to him to draw clear boundaries between Jews and Christians. My impression is not, but I don't know, because I do not know very well the historical facts, whether there could possibly be Christians who followed Jewish rituals on the Sabbath and so on in North Africa. It's not my impression that this was the case, but you might know better about this. Another possibility is, were there Jewish communities in North Africa? Have we any evidence that there were simply Jewish communities at the time of Augustine? This is another possibility why he had to struggle to clarify his interpretation of the Old Testament. Then there is the last thing is about this with the role of the Jews, which Augustine claims to be being at service for the Christians, preaching proclaiming the law to the Gentiles. But I already said something about that. So there are open questions here. It's clear whom Augustine is talking to, but why is he doing so much on this? It's more unclear to me, but maybe Rodrigo or others have some comments on that in the end. Now I want to go to the next text.
Sorry, Anders, we are hearing you well, but we are not looking your face. So perhaps you can restart your camera, just
yes.
Not the PowerPoint, but it's okay for us, but we are not looking your face.
I can see that my...
Yes, now you are again.
Okay,
perfect.
Fine. So the next text is Contra Faustum, chapter of 12, you can call it whatever you want. This Faustus was a Manichaean, as Augustine himself had been for a number of years, but at the time when Augustine wrote this text, Augustine has changed and been changed to be a Catholic Christian. So he was in a conflict with the Manichaeans, including Faustus, who was a leading figure among the Manichaeans. So he had discussions about very many things in this text, Contra Faustum, and in this chapter it's about how to understand the Hebrew Bible. So that's what they are discussing, whether these Hebrew texts are of any value and how they should be interpreted. And Faustus has a very negative negative attitude, he says that against Augustine, that the Jewish prophets do not prophesy about Christ, nor do one find any other positive advice in the Jewish prophets. And then I have a quote here: all we look for in the prophets is prudence and virtue and a good example, which you are well aware are not to be found in the Jewish prophets. So Faustus has a strongly negative attitude towards at least the Hebrew Bible and the Jewish prophets, but there's still a question: did Faustus know any Jews from his own time? So what we can see here now from this quote is that he has a very negative view on Jews. Then Augustine replies to this, what Faustus said. So this was, of course, a quote from Augustine also, but he referred to Faustus' position. Then Augustine replies, the meaning of all this is that the Hebrew prophets foretold nothing of Christ, and that if they did, their predictions are of no use to us, and they themselves did not live suitably to the dignity of such prophecies. This is Augustine summarizing Faustus' point of view. And then Augustine continues, we must therefore prove the fact of the prophecies and their use for the truth and steadfastness of our faith, and that the lives of the prophets were in harmony with their words. So here we see this internal conflicts between Christians about how to understand the Jewish scriptures. So here we can see Augustine holds a more positive view of the Old Testament prophets or the Hebrew prophets than Faustus did. So suddenly Augustine turns out to be the one who is positive towards the Hebrew prophets, and Faustus is the negative one. So the question is, of course, is Augustine positive because he is positive, or is he positive because Faustus is more negative than he is? But this again has not much to do with any concrete use. It's an internal discussion between two groups of Christians discussing how their differences in their attitude towards the Jews. Continuing a little bit with some quotes from this text, Augustine goes on to say further in the text in paragraph 9 to 10, the Jews' mistake is that they did not recognize that they were sinners and they need salvation in Christ. That's a very typical Christian claim. That's also one which could be used much later in, without relation to Jews, Christians condemning other groups of Christians that they do not know that they are sinners and need Christ. For example, if you go to the times of the European Reformations, you can see Protestant theologians say the same to Catholic theologians, that they do not realize that they need the salvation in Christ. But here in Augustine, it's this claim is directed to the Jews. And then the next quote: for the man who keeps Christ in his heart does not ask like Cain. And here we come to this. Cain plays a central role in Augustine's understanding of the Jews. Am I my brother's keeper? Cain says. Then God says to Cain, what have you done? The voice of your brother's blood cries unto me from the ground. So the voice of God in the Holy Scriptures accuses the Jews. for the blood of Christ has a loud voice on the earth. So here you suddenly see a connection between, Augustine makes between Cain's killing of Abel, who was righteous of these two, and now the Jews' killing of Christ. So as Abel's blood cried from the ground to God, then now the Christ's blood cries to God, because they killed Christ. And then this continues in the next paragraph. So the unbelieving people of the Jews, now they are the unbelieving people, is cursed from the earth, that is from the church. So here, like Cain was cursed from the land, promised land. Now the Jews are they are cursed from another land, which is the church, which in the confession of sins has opened its mouth to receive the bloodshed for the remission of sins by the hand of the people that would not be under grace but under the law. So here again there are some semi-positive, not really positive, but even if it's very negative that the Jews killed Christ like Cain killed Abel, then the result is positive for the Christians. Now they because of the killing of Christ can, by receiving the blood of Christ in the Eucharist, be saved. So in an indirect way, the Jews becomes the way for the Christian salvation, but the Jews themselves are cursed from the land of God, which now is the church. So here again we have this well-known theme that the Jews killed Christ, but with this strange touch which we often see in Augustine, that there is a positive result of that, not for the Jews but for the Christians themselves. I took a couple of more. I don't know if we need all these quotations. I skip these two because it's the same, and go to my arrow signalizes my conclusion here. Like Cain, the Jews are dismissed from their homeland, but they should not be killed because their misery should be assigned to the Christians. Let me just I did not skip anything that important, I think. And then to the third text, I can see the time is running, and I start with a quote from City of God, the 18th book. But the Jews who slew him and would not believe in him, because it behooved him to die and rise again. Here the Jews becomes the tool in the hand of God, again, as we so often see, were yet more miserably wasted by the Romans. So this is the punishment of the Jews because of the killing of Christ, and utterly rooted out from their kingdom, where aliens had already ruled over them and were dispersed through the lands. So this is the Jews because of the killing of Christ. They are spread out of their own country to all other lands, so that indeed there is no place where they are not, and are thus by their own scriptures a testimony to us that we have not forged the prophecies about Christ. What does that mean? The Jews are all over the world, Augustine says. But what does that mean? Does it mean that they also were in North Africa at the time of Augustine, or is that again some kind of imagination. I continue here with a longer quote, which is important. I couldn't transcribe this correctly, so it looks a bit strange. But here's the quote. For us, indeed, those suffice which are quoted from the books of our enemies, whom we make our acknowledgement on account of this testimony. This is the books of our enemies, the books of the Jews, the Hebrew Bible. On account of this testimony, which in spite of themselves, they contribute by their possession of these books, while they themselves are dispersed among the nations, wherever the church of Christ is spread abroad. So the Jews carry around their books all over the world and teaches the Christians, so to say, by carrying the books around the world. For a prophecy about this thing was sent before in the Psalm, which they also read, the Jews read, where it's written, my God, his mercy shall prevent me. My God has shown me concerning my enemies that you shall, and here it comes, you shall not slay them, lest they should at last forget your law, disperse them in your might. Therefore God has shown the church in her enemies, the Jews, the grace of his compassion, since, as says the apostle, their offense is the salvation of the Gentiles. And then we are back to the Romans 11. He has not slain them, that is, he has not let the knowledge that they are Jews be lost in them, although they have been conquered by the Romans. So they still are a people, so to say, even if they are dismissed out of the land, lest they should forget the law of God, and their testimony should be of no avail in this matter of which we treat. But it was not enough that he should say, slay them not, lest they should at last forget your law, unless he also added, disperse them, because if they had only been in their own land with that testimony of the scriptures and not everywhere, certainly the church, which is everywhere, could not have had them as witnesses among all nations to the prophecies which are sent before concerning Christ. So here you again have this idea that Jews should have been slain, killed because they killed Christ, but God had a plan. He used them as a kind of missionaries to carry around the holy scriptures and to all the places on earth where there were also Christians. So the Jews are still alive, so to say, because they have a task to do for the sake of the Christians. So again, the positive attitude, if you can call this a positive attitude, is not because of the Jews themselves, but because of their roles for the Christians. Just some conclusions here. The general theme again is how to understand Hebrew Bible and the prophecies. Are they about Christ or not? Augustine claims, yes, the Hebrew Bible tells about Christ, and therefore it's important that the Jews carries them around the world for the sake of the Christians. This is my second conclusion. That Jews should be allowed to exist, not as a sign of goodwill towards the Jews, but because they bear witness to Christ for the Christians. So, can you call this a positive view on the Jews or not? It's hardly that positive because nothing is unto the Jews for their own sake, only for the sake of the Christians. So to my last general conclusions, Augustine know any Jews concretely, or is he always just talking to Christians about the holy, the Hebrew scripture, which now is the Old Testament for the Christians? Are his Jews imagined or real, you could ask. So probably there were some Jews, and we saw this at least one hint that there were a concrete Jew in Augustine's area in North Africa. And as he says himself, they were scattered all over the world. When he says the Jews are scattered, dispersed all over the world, is this then a demographic observation, or is it an ideological statement? That you cannot decide from Augustine's own text, but then you would have to have more concrete historical, archaeological even sources for this. So I would say that the text discussed above, these three texts are dealing with the Jews of the Hebrew Bible and not with concrete Jews in Augustine's surroundings. But whether he knew such communities, I don't know. We can discuss that. And then we come to these competing evaluations of Augustine's attitudes. There is the traditional point of view. Augustine was as harsh anti-Jewish as all or most all of other early Christian theologians, and you can say he shares the idea that the Jews are murderers of Christ. He claims that they do not understand the Hebrew Bible. He claims that they lost God's election and the promises of God. So this is all the same type of traditional claims. But then on the other hand, he had comparatively more mild attitude to the Jews, and this is Friedrichsen's point of view. For example, he argued that they should not be killed but dispersed, and also says that the Christians should protect the Jews as Cain was protected by God. But why does he have this comparatively positive attitude? Probably not because of the Jews themselves, but because of the Christians. And then, so this is the two positions you still have, as you pointed out in your book, Rodrigo. And then it came to my mind, how do contemporary Jews in Israel look at this question? And I was visiting Yad Vashem a number of times during the years, and which is a Holocaust museum in Jerusalem, Jewish Holocaust museum, and the story told there about anti-Jewish attitudes mainly in Europe from the beginning until now. This story begins with Augustine as the source for all later anti-Jewish and anti-Semitic cruelties who has appeared during the whole history of Europe. So it's clearly the people at the museum there, for them, Augustine is the root of European anti-Semitism. So that's at least one interpretation. So they begin with large banners with all these quotations from Augustine, where he, with negative sayings about the Jews. But yeah, it's open for discussion. So this was the end. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Andre, for your presentation. It was really interesting. And now we will open to question, commentaries, and if they want to make...
Stop sharing my screen, or do we need to...
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I stop sharing, then I can see more of you. Yeah.
Perfect. So I will turn to Spanish and then we will translate, or perhaps if the question is just in English, you will hear it. Si tienen alguna pregunta, comentario, lo que quieran, pueden abrir el micrófono.
Hay una pregunta. Alexander tiene una pregunta.
Ah, perfecto.
Pero puedo preguntar después que termines lo que ibas a decir en castellano.
No, pero Esteban es así, es crudo, así que... Pero
no, pensé que quizás no había visto, como salió ahí abajo en el chat, yo te avisaba nomás.
Right.
No, preguntar y en inglés vos, Alexander, que hablas.
Yes. I really wanted to ask something that came up to me at the end of the presentation. Well, about whether it's a real Jewish group or an imagined Jew. Mm-hmm. From what we know and must have known back then, because they had access to the Bible, there was a dispersion before the Romans destroyed the temple. Yeah. So, and we know it, and they might have known it because Paul sends letters all over the place, and he knows that there were Jews all over the Mediterranean. So the question is, what did it take that into consideration, or was it some kind of, or was it actually like a stereotypical version of history where, used it as a kind of trope?
Yeah. I think the last, because I have not seen any places in Augustine where he says yes, but the Jews were dispersed several centuries before Christ, which is a well-known fact also to Paul and probably also to Augustine. So I think he creates this idea that the Jews were spread because they killed Christ, and the Romans then destroyed the temple and the city of Jerusalem, and the Jews were driven out, and that was, then they moved to all over the world. And there is probably, we know that the temple were destructed in 70, of course, and also the Jews, there at least were some restrictions. They were differing from time to time whether Jews could live in Jerusalem or not. There probably were always Jews living in Jerusalem in a certain number, but there is this. The Jews were not allowed to live in Jerusalem after 70, but that might not have been. Most Jews were not spread around the world because of that, but were spread all over the world long before. But Augustine never says that, I think.
Gracias, Alexander. We have another question in Spanish. I will translate it.
Here.
Okay. Vos, perdón.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for your presentation. I would like to ask you something. In your opinion, is Augustine's attitude towards Jews typical as his time? Or do you find any particularity as compared with other ecclesiastical referents?
I think it's quite typically for his time, but you find Augustine, as in many other cases, he has written a lot more, so we have much more evidence from Augustine than most of the others. And when we read others, for example, Justin or others, it can seem to be a bit more rude, just the Jews killed Christ, but probably, basically, it was the same, but Augustine has some more refined reflections about, for example, why was the Jews not just killed, but spread all over the world? and then he had some create some theological ideas out of that. So in that way, he's similar, but he's a bit more, I would say, a bit more advanced than most other theologians. Then you have in the East some who are more also reflecting more than most. For example, Chrysostom, who has there it's more clear that he in his community there are concrete problems because there is no clear line between Jews and Christians, and as a bishop he wants to have a clear-cut line who are Jews, who are Christians, and this is his concrete struggle, and therefore we know from his sermons many more concrete things. And then, for example, also if you go to Origen of Alexandria, who is comparing, we could compare to Augustine in the East. So he's the great theologian of the East, and Augustine is the great theologian of the West. So Origen has a much more positive. He also says all these things about the Bible belong to the Christians, and the Jews do not understand them, and so on. But there we know that he actually, he for example, made this great hexapla with of the Hebrew Bible, Old Testament, with different versions of the text, the Hebrew text, and Greek translations, and so on. And there he worked together with some actual Jews in Alexandria. So he had not he had a more personally open attitude to the Jews, but he at the same time he had these theological views against the Jews. I hope this was yeah.
Great, thanks. We have other question in Spanish. So Pablo Sierra is asking if the idea of the necessity of protection of the Jews because of this notion of estes veritatis, so the witness of the truth that you mentioned, was particular to Augustine, or or has any precedent?
As far as I know, this is particular to Augustine, but I'm not totally sure, but I think it's specific, or at least much more developed in Augustine than in other theologians in the first centuries.
Yeah. Yes, I agree with that. And we have now Mariano Splendido is a colleague that is he wants to make a question. Mariano?
In English?
Oh, yes, great. Yeah.
Sí, sí.
Well, Anders, I've not read Augustine as you have done. I worked with Cyprian of Carthage, which is a century and a half before. But in Cyprian, seems not to be a lot of mentions of Judaism, and a lot of researchers think that, for example, Judaism for him it's something anachronistic and negative, and even superseded reality. For the time of Augustine, is there any evidence, archaeologically speaking, or I don't know, about the size of the Jewish community? Is there something in North Africa? Because for the time of Cyprian, it seems to be practically non-existent.
Unfortunately, I know next to nothing about the concrete history of Judaism in North Africa, or archaeological evidence and so on. So I'm not able to answer, but what you say is well in line with what I understand from Augustine's text, that there is not many, if any, concrete Jews on the ground. He's discussing Hebrew Bible, and with his Christian opponents, the Manichaeans or the Christians in his congregation and so on. But there don't seem to be any Jews involved at all. It seems mainly to be an internal Christian discussion, and that points to that there would not be any concrete Jewish communities. But I'm not able to answer this. But maybe Rodrigo or others could answer this.
I agree with you, and I will add that. Yeah, we have 2 archaeological remains of synagogues, but not in Iporregio, not in Ipona, but in Hammam Leaf and in Lydia. They are near Cartago the First and not far from Cartago the Second, and they are late ancient synagogues. With Hammam Leaf it was an ancient Naro, and we know that. They were synagogues because in the mosaics they state explicitly Sancta Synagoga, the narrow one, but none in Ipona. So in Iporregio, and there are also catacombs in Gamart near Carthage also. But I agree with Anders that even in cities where we have Jewish presence as Alexandria or Rome, and we can find authors that speak about Jews as rhetorical devices, hermeneutical devices, because their main focus was not the Jews but the other Christians, the community problems. As Anders suggested, they are trying to mark the difference between the correct Christian behavior and the non-correct Christian behavior. So I think that we have to look for real Jews in our period, but sometimes the discourse of the fathers of the church is not related to that reality.
Yeah, and often it's a discussion about how is the Hebrew Bible part of Christian scriptures? Should it be part of Christian scriptures or not? And if they should, how should they then be interpreted? So it's internal Christian discussions about Hebrew scriptures, mainly, I would say, in many cases, like in Augustine.
Yes, I was astonished with that Yad Vashem story about the museum. It's because from my point of view, Augustine is one of the milder anti-Jewish fathers. But of course, I sometimes have discussed with different scholars, and sometimes they said no, he was absolutely anti-Jewish. But I follow Fredrickson, and my question to you is regarding origin of Alexandria, because you mentioned him and you are a specialist in origin. I know that you are not researching Judaism in origin, but if you have some ideas about the attitude of origin towards the Jews, or the idea of the Pantera was the father of Jesus, and that we can find in the Contra Celso, Contra Gelsum, if you want, and if you, because I know that it's not your field.
No, but I would say that the origin is discussing very, very much the Hebrew scriptures, because he's an exegete interpreting the Christian holy scriptures, and for him the Hebrew scriptures are as important as Christian New Testament scriptures. But he's always, as you probably know, allegorizing these interpretations, and so it's not. He do not have the same style as Augustine, where he, so to say, needs to use the Jews as a negative, the negative others to present what Christianity is. He is much more like the Old Testament. The Old Testament was prophesying, like Augustine also says, about Christianity, and so it's just about to interpret these scriptures, and then you know what they mean for Christians. And he do not really need to be negative towards the Jews. He can say things like only the Christians understand fully what the Hebrew scriptures is about, and so on. But he do not say that the Jews do not understand, have no understanding of. So there's a more like there's a Jewish understanding which is at the literal level, and the Christians are able to understand the same text at a deeper allegorical level. But you don't need to be negative towards the Jews for that reason. And then we know also of these personal relations to Jewish scholars in Alexandria, which probably also is a part of his positive attitude to Judaism.
Right. Thanks. So is there any question? Someone wants to comment something? Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much, Professor Jacobsen. Y muchas gracias para todos los que sean el día de hoy, o sea también en los días que han podido acompañarnos de las sesiones anteriores del ciclo, lo han hecho. Aprovecho para comentar, porque varias personas nos han preguntado por los certificados, los vamos a estar mandando a partir de la semana próxima, así que lo recibirán, ya veremos el modo, si directamente al mail o si lo subimos a alguna carpeta en alguna nube, ¿sí? Pero a partir de la semana que viene nos vamos a poner con eso. De mi parte, entonces, muchísimas gracias a todos. Creo, y hablando con gente que participó, había una cierta coincidencia en que realmente estuvo interesante y que escuchamos cosas muy útiles, además de que ha servido para que nos pongamos en contacto con personas de distintos lugares y de distintas instituciones aquí mismo en el país también. Rodrigo, te dejo que haga vos también el cierre final, la despedida final.
Bueno, no mucho más que agregar. Again, thanks, Anders. I owe you a lot of things, but thanks for this participation also.
It was a great pleasure to be able to see you and join you in this circular conferences, which is a great thing. And I was happy that you invited me. So hopefully the world will change so I can come to Argentina again, or you can come to Denmark, any of you, if when the world is better again. So
So, bueno, y now in Spanish, muchísimas gracias a todas, a todos los que y las que participaron. La verdad es que con Esteban, y con Ignacio, y con Uriel, y con Violeta, y con Sofía, estamos muy, muy contentos, sobre todo de la gente que ha asistido, y del compromiso que han mostrado, y nada, y estamos muy felices, y hacemos cerramos por última vez con un aplauso, y nos despedimos.